The newly elected president of the Senate, Godswill Akpabio, promises to run an all-inclusive Senate that surpasses Nigerians' expectations. Now, Akpabio said this during his acceptance speech, moments after he was declared the Senate president for the next 4 years. With this victory, Akpabio emerges the 9th Senate president since 1999. Omar Bazwai has more on this.
Nigeria has a new Senate president, and he is the former governor of Akwa Ibom State, Godswill Akpabio. Akpabio won the privilege to become the next Senate president after a keenly contested election between him and the former governor of Zamfara State, Abdulaziz Yari. It was the moment of truth, the moment many have been waiting for in the Senate, as senators-elect filed out to make their choice of who takes the mantle of leadership. It's the first major task, and it came moments after the clerk to the National Assembly had announced a presidential proclamation that breathed life into the new Senate amidst calls for nominations. As expected, the battle for the Senate presidency turned out a two-horse race between two senators, Akpabio from Akwa Ibom State and Yari from Zamfara State. A momentary rancor in the chamber had earlier ensued after Senator Ishiaku Abo from Adamawa State nominated Senator Yari to take the chair as the next Senate president. The rancor centered around Yari's eligibility, whether or not he is ranking enough to take the Senate seat. But it didn't take time for the boiling anger to simmer down and for the clerk to order that the contest be put to voting, and in an open secret ballot manner. At the end of the voting and counting, Akpabio with 63 votes emerged the winner and thus declared the Senate president for the 10th Assembly, leaving his main challenger Abdulaziz Yari with 46 and the consolation of putting up a spirited fight.
I will dwell on Nigeria. I will make a very big difference. I assure you that my reputation precedes me. My track record is there for all to see.
We are so much so ready more so to cooperate and work in line with our president. He has shown the first steps, rightful steps, that we must encourage him.
It's a good day for democracy. I think the battle was fought, won and lost. But I think the important thing is that immediately after that election, the person who did not win approached the winner and congratulated him, and we were all impressed.
The position of the Deputy Senate President did not present much conflict, as Senator Barau Jibrin from Kano North was returned unopposed. But it was the climax that many in APC had looked forward to in the build-up. With the leadership formed, the President of the Senate, Godswill Akpabio, then swore in the remaining 107 senators-elect in the presence of dignitaries and top members of the governing All Progressive Congress APC, who had come to witness the proclamation of the 10th Senate.
We will work with the executive. We understand that our relationship with that of cooperation and contestation, because in opting for the presidential system and in drafting the constitution, I think it is implied that whereas the president have the whole country to look after, he doesn't have monopoly of wisdom.
For me, I have the role of ensuring that I contribute in whatever way I can to support them, the presiding officers particularly, but also in a way give some kind of support, of mentorship to some of our new colleagues.
From the immediate past Senate President Ahmed Lawal to Godswill Akpabio, the 10th Senate has now taken shape, but with plenty of expectations resting on its shoulders. Omar Bazwai, Arise News.
Many thanks, Omar. Plenty expectations, not only from members, but all of Nigerians and even the continent watching. While we are waiting for Obi Agwaja, who is a member of the House of Representatives, we can bring in our analyst of the day, the current affairs analyst, professor of communications and deputy dean of the postgraduate school of Adeniyi University in Abuja, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, and also journalist, political affairs commentator and Arise News analyst, Dr. Constance Ikokwu. Good to see you both. And finally is upon us. Everyone thought, looked forward to this big day. And we've had that conversation here. But again, let's start with you, Constance. Well, by the way, for those watching outside Abuja, it's a raining day. In Abuja, it's been raining cats, dogs, and even hippos. But it looks as if finally what the APC wanted was gotten. But let's start by looking at the votes, Constance. 46 for Abdulaziz Yari and Godswill Akpabio, 63. That was a keenly fought battle. What does this mean for the 10th Senate?
Yes, you're correct. It was a keenly contested position, and it's good that everyone was allowed, to contest, test your power or test your popularity, and then let's see what happens. At the end of the day, the party got their candidates both in the Senate and the House of Representatives. And I was listening to Godswill Akpabio when he delivered his speech after he was sworn in. And he touched on so many different things. He struck the right chord. For instance, he mentioned working as a team with his colleagues, which was important. He talked about being aware of the enormous responsibilities that are before him now. And then he mentioned aligning the laws of the country with the vision of the president. It also talked about youth innovation and gender matters. But what struck me most were two things. He said that he will discharge his responsibilities with integrity. And then secondly, he mentioned that the nation needs to diversify its resources. There has to be multiple sources of income. That is very critical at this juncture in our nation. And I think, yes, that integrity, they will need it a lot. There's so much that needs to be done. There are existential problems ongoing. I mean, when you talk about revenue, diversifying revenue, there's so much stealing going on in the country. Our nation is really bleeding. So we need people with integrity and the National Assembly with a backbone together with the executive to stop that bleeding. For instance, I am also happy that he mentioned he mentioned natural resources, solid minerals, a lot of them being smuggled out. So for instance, there was a hearing in the past in the National Assembly, and it was discovered that at least $5 billion has been lost through smuggling of gold in this country between 2012 and 2018. You have 6 trillion import waivers given to people in an opaque environment without understanding what is going on. You have monies that are voted for turnaround maintenance of our refineries disappearing into private pockets. So you really need people that have that integrity to pursue this, because we are removing fuel subsidy. People are going to be sacrificing. So you have to take really serious steps to rein in all that is going on if we have to, sort of bounce back in the economy.
Yeah, I want us to come back on the issue of natural resources, which you spoke about, and bring in perhaps the Zamfara angle. The Niger Delta is one, and there's also a natural resource which many have also, thought was the main reason of banditry in Yari's home state. But Professor Adeniyi, let's talk about the votes. That's a big one. What will this mean for the Senate, for Godswill Akpabio leadership, knowing full well that it wasn't an easy ride? There's still a lot of people, more than half, that were not on his side on D-Day.
Well, if my memory serves me right, this is not the first time we're going to have a very close contest in the Senate. In the first Senate of this democratic dispensation, it was always very close, between Okadigbo and Owerem. At those points, you will see a situation where the votes were very close. But I want to believe that Godswill Akpabio is is not a very small politician. He's very charismatic. He's very suave. He's imbued with substantial rhetorical flourish. And it could be good in maneuvering. In winning over people who are not necessarily with him over time. Our system, political atmosphere can be very fluid. Yes, there may be people who didn't vote for him, but in no time you could see him, if he's smart enough, like I trust, you can see him, winning their love, at some point. So it may not necessarily mean that they will continue to be in the opposition at the end of the day. And do not forget that very shortly, committee positions will be allocated. Different opportunities are in front of them. They will not want to continue the agitation, the disagreement, as the case could be, believing that they also have a greater role to play in the Senate. Most of them are always, like they always tell us, and like we're willing to believe, they're always in a hurry to make their mark, And you cannot make your mark necessarily by being a perpetual fighter or being in disagreement with the authority. And like Senator Benga Daniel said, you could see immediately after it was obvious that Akpabio was going to win. Senator Elisha Abo went and embraced Akpabio. And of course, Akpabio and Yari too were warm in embrace. And of course, in his speech too, Akpabio acknowledged, praised Yari, saying that he is going to work with him. It's going to be a cardinal point, somebody that is going to partner with. So you can see rapprochement already beginning, and I think this is going to be elevated, because if you look at the Senate generally, it's not a place where you can work in silos. You need cooperation. So in no time we might see these differentiations petering out, and you see another one Senate, that we can judge as a body that is probably, helping us, to drive good governance, or that is probably doing otherwise. And it won't take time before we begin to see this, going by our past experiences.
Very quickly here, Dr. Ikokwu, one other sore point will now be true representation of the people, because they're done. It is believed that they're done with the party politics, and now is the time for them to look at their constituents, their constituencies, and the Nigerian people. In the days to come, the president may likely also be turning his list of ministers. Now, perhaps let's first set an agenda for the Senate. I want to go back to the issue of natural resources. It's very key here. We have a bleeding nation and a bleeding economy, and there's hardly any state you don't have a natural resource or resources. How do you think, because this may just amount to words, how can the National Assembly truly activate this to the extent that states can have access to such resources and get the economy busy again?
It all boils down to sincerity. A lot of the people that come into power some of them never dreamed of doing that. They got there by chance. And then some did prepare for it, and when they get there, they get carried away. And the influence and the pressures from left, right, and center, and they forget the reason why they got there in the first place. And I go back to what he said about integrity. There's an integrity deficit in government among politicians, and it cuts across parties. It's not only the APC, it's also the PDP. You would find it in ABGA, you would find it in Labour. So the question becomes, this assembly now, the last assembly, people felt like it was almost a rubber stamp, and it wasn't very vibrant and active as it should be. Mr. Godswill Akpabio has said, the laws have to align with the vision of the president. Yes, it should. At the same time, the assembly should be such that will constructively differ or disagree with the executive arm of government, if and when need be. Why? Because they're two different arms of government, and they are working for the interests of the people. They are paid by the Nigerian nation, by myself and yourself, to work in the interests of the country. So these are issues that need to be trashed out, especially going back to what you mentioned, revenue. You know, we remove fuel subsidy, and we're looking for revenue to drive the economy, to drive the country. So that means that all those loopholes, all those areas where there are leakages, you have to be serious and committed to stopping those leakages. And it involves the officers themselves, National Assembly members, the executive arm of government. Everybody should be involved in doing this. It has to be a teamwork, and they have to do it with sincerity. Let's forget about our personal interest for 1 minute and look at what will benefit Nigeria in the long term. The country is really almost on its knees. We're talking about the 16 trillion that was stolen in the name of subsidy. The CBN governor has been suspended. Are there other officers in the past administration that should be called to account to tell us what is going on, or what went on? How do we stop all those things? So there's a lot of work to be done. The officers have been, elected. Now is the time to settle in, to do serious work. Now is the time to settle in, to begin to write down what are the areas that we need to focus in different parts of the economy. The president is moving at speed. He's really made a lot of decisions in rapid succession over the past couple of weeks. So we're hoping that this will follow. There will be rapid succession in terms of the decisions that he makes in the future. So everybody is expecting and watching.
Let me take off from where you left off, and we're talking about the momentum which the president has built already. Can the National Assembly sustain that on the back of the talk of natural resource? I still want to stay on that just a bit, because I recall then it was in 2020 that I think there were these issues of the gold in Zamfara State, illicit mining of our natural resources in so many other states. How can we actually, through the National Assembly, activate in the same speed as we've seen the president lately?
Well, I think beyond gold, gold is obviously solid minerals. There's also agriculture, if we're talking about diversification. There's also
sorry about development. Do you know why I like to stay on that natural resource? Yeah. Sometimes it looks as if we just have oil.
Yes.
And we talk about agriculture. No, I'm coming. That's what we sometimes tell to the people. Yeah. And we have some crop of people who sit somewhere, and that was when the president, at the point in time, the former president, declared a no-flight zone, because smaller aircrafts were dropping in some of these places and taking away our common good.
Well, that's a shame of our country. If you remember, Suleiman, we've been talking about diversifying our country, our economy away from the monocultural status we have always been for many years, And of course, we've got so many alternatives, like I was trying to mention, agriculture, solid minerals, like you mentioned, steel development is there. That one is comatose with our experience with Ajakuta. Very unfortunate. Yes, we can deal with the question of inefficiency, the absence of productivity on the part of our institution. We can blame several things, for the fact that we'll not be able to register successes in these areas, But again, in the new dispensation, what can happen really is the vision of the executive. The National Assembly as a body can only operate from the prism of private member bill, which can originate from groups and interests, as the case could be, but essentially from private member bill. But of course, we know that executive bill often have potency much more than private member bill. So the vision largely rests at the level of the executive. And of course, what are the things that the executive will be thinking about that will need some level of regulation, some regulatory mechanism, that the National Assembly will enhance. I do not think there's anything that's particularly new that has not been legislated upon, really. If you look at it, all we've been trying to do in the last couple of years is just to strengthen existing legislation, to maybe amend it, improve it, and all of that in accordance with changing realities. There's actually nothing really new if you look at many of these bills critically. But again, it comes down to implementation. To what extent have we been executing, the bills that we have in place, Of course, in that regard, you would know, it will lead us again to the question of the failure of our institutions, the fact that our institutions are weak. And when we're talking about institutions, We're talking about the ones that are physical and the ones that are virtual, or the ones that are actual and the ones that are virtual. All these are still very weak. But again, we need leadership to strengthen those institutions. And the mindset of a leader that will strengthen it is one that is concerned about leaving legacies. Not one, that would want to enjoy his or her ego, his or her pride and prestige. They want to further the culture of feudalism. The culture of the rentier system. The culture is of just me. I am the state. Like the famous philosopher who want to call it that I am the state, so everything should be around me. No, everything should not be around you. You are merely supposed to set a direction. For the interest of sustainability. So when you are not there, you can see the system functioning fine in the interest of not just the present generation, but generation yet unborn. And that's why Constance was kept harping on integrity, trust, and all of that. All these things can be enhanced if we have a very strong institution. It may not even matter at the end of the day about individual predilections, individual emotions, sentiments. Once institutions are strong enough, the humans populating the system will be regulated by those institutions. But our bane is still the weakness of our institutions, and that's why we're seeing some of these things not working fine the way we want.
The weakness of our institutions, and Dr. Constance Ikokwu, how can we strengthen through our representatives, talking about the National Assembly, these institutions? Because we all know what to do. Tell me the region in the country that doesn't have a resource or resources to actually make us a better and a prosperous nation. What can the National Assembly do? This whole talk, I'm running away from the cliche, true federalism. So I don't want to do cliches here. So, but what can they do to truly help us get these up and running?
So not only what they can do, what can we as Nigerians do as well? Because this is our country. We have to be involved, we have to participate, we have to be engaged, we have to hold them to account. And individually, the president makes a lot of appointments. For instance, all the parastatals, the president makes those appointments, right? Most government offices, the president makes the appointments. So when he's making the appointments, are they picking the right people? Because, for instance, you see an organization like the EFCC, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, which was set up under President Olusegun Obasanjo to fight corruption. And they really worked, the pioneer chairman worked so hard to make sure that Nigeria becomes a nation that corruption was no longer our tag. They did a fantastic job for 8 years. But now you hear stories like the EFCC chairman, someone accusing them, or the EFCC itself as an institution, people accusing them of stealing the money that they have recovered from other people. What kind of country does that thing happen? And the person is still sitting down there. Doesn't he need to be investigated? These things need to be investigated. So the people that you're picking for certain positions, or all the positions, you have to make sure that they also have that integrity. And then you as a Nigerian, when you get the opportunity to be in government, when you get the opportunity to work for the country, do the right thing. Because I think we're very quick to point fingers at other people, but you're pointing fingers and it's also pointing at you. When you have the chance, do you do the right thing? In our daily lives, every day, when you take transport, public transport, in everything that you're doing, in your small ministry office, whether you're a secretary, you're a clerk, you're a gate man, whatever you are you doing the right thing? So it's a collective work for everybody. Everybody, the society functions when people are working collectively and have that common vision that it's our country, but also the leaders have to make people believe that you are part of the country, you have a stake in this country. If I believe that I have a stake in my nation, I will work very hard to make it work.
Let's bring the communication expert here now, Professor Adeniyi, quickly here, because because I recall then, time was, I'm taking off from where Constance left off, and it has to do with some kind of reorientation. Once upon a time, we had MAMSA. And we now have, we now have NOA. I think the last time we had a boisterous NOA was when, you saw the NOA dealing with security challenge. They had this weekly meeting with the security, with the DSS and the police and all coming. That was when they had the phrase, see something, say something, with Michael Mary. I was trying to remember the gentleman's name. So how can the government help to get that social re-engineering and reorientation?
It's very, very important, really, because no system moves, without a new level of conscientization, especially when you want to say change the narrative around culture, around values, around virtues, around conduct. You need a deliberate mobilization, a deliberate conscientization, awareness around a new narrative. But much more importantly, Suleiman, it's not enough, to preach goodness, to preach good governance, or to ask the populace to be compliant, to do the right thing. It's not really enough. What works fastest and probably best is if you lead, by showing example. It can actually work. People will definitely fall into line if they see that you are leading, showing good example. If you are asking people not to be ostentatious, and of course they are seeing you luxuriating, wallowing in opulence, at the expense of probably not with your own personal resources, but at the expense of the state, they're likely to believe you less, But if they see you showing good example, you ask them to make sacrifice, then you too are concerned about making sacrifices. You are limiting maybe the jets at your disposal, the number of cars in your fleet, the number of eats that you're going to have. Of course, they will know that you're really serious. So action actually matters, first before, canvassing for support, for change, just in a vacuum, because it will just make individuals or leaders look hypocritical. But I do agree that we need some level of awareness creation, realizing that nation building is not necessarily something that happens in a vacuum. It's always deliberate. You made deliberate, painstaking efforts, and some of them tangible, some of them intangible. When we say tangible, we're probably talking about structures that you are putting in place. When we say intangible, you're probably talking about attitudinal reorientation, to what extent citizen diplomacy, citizen involvement and inclusion. To what extent will you say they are involved? Have you galvanized them enough for them to believe in their Nigerianness, like we see in some other countries? All these things work together, so if we realize it, well, I'm not going to say that the new president has started badly. The enthusiasm is there. The momentum seems to be there. But the characteristics of past leadership, like we always seen, is that they will start with a very high momentum, and at the point they will drop it. Because they'll probably just withdraw into their shelf. Normalcy will return, even though there's a high level of abnormality. We hope that this is going to be different. It will sustain the momentum, and probably try to change the narrative around the lethargy that we have seen in governance in past years.
Well, it's a fine place for us to leave it here. I'd like to thank you for your time, Dr. Constance Ikokwu and Professor Abiodun Adeniyi. And many thanks more, especially as you brought in the perspective of the Nigerian, spirit. We need to really work on that some other time.